At the start of the 2000s, most Americans felt that major wars and threats were far away. Daily life centered on work, school, and family, with the skyline of New York City standing as a symbol of business, hope, and modern life. The United States had already seen terrorism before 9/11, the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, embassy bombings in Africa, and attacks on American ships showed that extremist groups were willing to target civilians and symbols of power. One of the most dangerous groups was Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. Operating from bases in Afghanistan and elsewhere, its members believed in using violence and surprise to attack the United States and its allies. Throughout the late 1990s and into 2001, intelligence agencies gathered pieces of information about possible attacks. Some reports mentioned hijackings or attempts to strike inside the United States, but the clues were scattered and incomplete. Before 9/11, airport security was less strict than it is today. People could walk to gates more easily, cockpit doors on planes were lighter, and security focused more on hijackings for ransom than on suicide attacks. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda members selected for the 9/11 mission quietly entered the United States. They blended into everyday life, taking flight lessons and learning airline routines, so that their plan would be harder to detect. Different agencies held different pieces of the puzzle, but systems for sharing information were limited. Some warnings were taken seriously, others were doubted, and no one realized how close a coordinated attack really was. On September 10, 2001, Americans finished an ordinary Monday. Flights took off and landed as usual, kids did homework, and office workers prepared for another busy day, not knowing that the world was about to change. As people went to bed that night, Tuesday, September 11th, looked like it would be just another day on the calendar. No one in New York, Washington, or Pennsylvania expected to wake up into one of the most important days in modern history. On the morning of September 11, 2001, skies over much of the United States were clear and blue. People in New York and Washington commuted to work, students headed to school, and air traffic controllers prepared for another routine day. At several airports in the Northeast, 4 flights, American 11, United 175, American 77, and United 93, boarded their passengers. For most people on board, it felt like just another business or vacation trip. Not long after takeoff, air traffic controllers began to notice unusual behavior from one of the planes. Radio contact dropped, and the aircraft veered off its planned path, triggering concern and confusion. On American Airlines Flight 11, hijackers took control of the cockpit. Some crew and passengers managed to send limited warnings, but events moved quickly, and the plane turned south toward New York City. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. People on the ground saw a fireball and smoke pour from the upper floors, unsure at first if it was an accident or something more. Television stations quickly interrupted their regular programs to show live images of the burning tower. Many viewers believed a small plane might have crashed, and anchors tried to make sense of the confusing reports. While people were still reacting to the first impact, United Flight 175 was also hijacked and turned toward New York. Some passengers made phone calls describing the terrifying situation on board. At 9:03 a.m., Flight 175 hit the South Tower in full view of cameras broadcasting live. The second impact made it clear that this was not an accident, but a coordinated attack. Viewers across the United States watched in disbelief as news anchors, officials, and ordinary people tried to understand what was happening. Phone networks clogged as families began calling loved ones in New York and Washington. Inside the towers, workers felt the building shake and hallways fill with smoke. Some were close to the impact zones, while many others lower down had to decide quickly whether to stay put or try to evacuate. Announcements over intercoms gave mixed instructions as information changed rapidly. In some areas, people were told to wait. In others, they were urged to leave immediately, leading to confusion and courage side by side. As soon as the first plane hit, New York City firefighters from across the city raced toward the World Trade Center. They grabbed gear, climbed into trucks, and headed toward danger while others tried to escape it. NYPD officers, Port Authority police, and EMS crews also converged on the site. They directed traffic, cleared routes for ambulances, and began setting up triage areas to help the injured. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon in Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. Flames and smoke rose from one side of the building as people evacuated and rescuers rushed in. Around the same time, United Flight 93 was hijacked over the eastern United States. Passengers learned about the other attacks through phone calls and realized their flight was likely part of the same plot. On Flight 93, passengers and crew members made the brave decision to fight back against the hijackers. Knowing the risks, they chose to act to prevent the plane from hitting another target. At 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Everyone on board was killed, but their resistance is widely believed to have prevented another strike on a high-value target in Washington. By late morning, the United States faced attacks in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania at the same time. Leaders, responders, and ordinary people had to react quickly to a crisis unlike anything they had ever seen. Inside the World Trade Center, firefighters began climbing the stairwells with heavy gear, hoses, tools, and breathing equipment. They moved upward floor by floor, helping injured people downward as they went. Many civilians also helped each other. Some carried co-workers down the stairs, shared wet cloths to breathe through the smoke, or stayed with injured friends until help arrived. Outside the towers, chiefs and officers from FDNY, NYPD, Port Authority Police, and EMS tried to coordinate a response. They had to manage fires, evacuations, traffic, and incoming reports, all under extreme pressure. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed, falling in seconds and sending a massive cloud of dust and debris through the surrounding streets. People ran, dove for cover, or sheltered inside buildings as the cloud rushed over them. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower also collapsed. The skyline of Lower Manhattan changed in a single morning, leaving behind a smoking, twisting field of steel and rubble where the Twin Towers had stood. A thick dust cloud rolled through nearby streets, coating buildings, vehicles, and people in gray. Survivors stumbled out of the haze, helped each other, and made their way to safety as best they could. As soon as they could, firefighters, police, and EMS teams began searching the rubble for survivors. They listened for voices, dug by hand, and used equipment to move broken beams and concrete. Many firefighters, police officers, and other first responders who went into the towers did not come back. They climbed upward knowing the danger, and their sacrifice is one of the most powerful parts of the 9/11 story. Hospitals across New York prepared for waves of injured people. Doctors, nurses, and EMTs stood ready in emergency rooms and triage tents, doing everything they could for those who made it out of the towers and Pentagon. New York City closed bridges and tunnels, grounded local flights, and cleared streets near the disaster area. People walked home or to safe places, often covered in dust and still trying to contact loved ones. All over the United States and the world, families and friends tried to find out if their loved ones were safe. Phone lines were overloaded, websites crashed, and many people waited hours or days for word. In New York, walls and fences filled with missing posters showing names and faces of those who had not come home. Candlelight vigils and gatherings gave people a way to share grief and hope together. That night, President George W. Bush spoke to the country from the Oval Office, promising that those responsible would be found and that the United States would stand together in the face of the attacks. Around the world, many nations expressed sympathy and support. People gathered at U.S. embassies, left flowers, and held moments of silence, recognizing that the impact of 9/11 went far beyond one country. In the days after, Americans paid special tribute to firefighters, police officers, EMS personnel, and other first responders. Parades, flags on firehouses, and lines of saluting colleagues honored those who had given their lives. Many FDNY firehouses lost entire crews. Black bunting and photos appeared on station doors, where neighbors left flowers, cards, and messages to say thank you and goodbye. Volunteers from across the region came to help by bringing food, water, tools, and emotional support to exhausted rescuers. Even if they could not work on the pile, they found ways to contribute. Churches, synagogues, mosques, and community centers held services to remember the victims. Across the country, people lit candles, wore ribbons, and tried to support those who were grieving. In the weeks after 9/11, the United States announced a war on terror, aimed at dismantling al-Qaeda and any governments that sheltered it. The focus quickly turned to Afghanistan, where al-Qaeda had built training camps. In October 2001, the United States and its allies began military operations in Afghanistan. Their goals were to remove the Taliban regime that sheltered al-Qaeda and to disrupt terrorist networks. At home, security changed dramatically. Airports added new screening procedures, cockpit doors were hardened, and new agencies were created to protect transportation and infrastructure. The U.S. government reorganized parts of its intelligence and emergency response systems, eventually creating the Department of Homeland Security and reforming how agencies shared information. Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities in the United States often faced suspicion and sometimes harassment after 9/11. At the same time, many leaders reminded the public that blaming entire groups for the actions of terrorists was wrong. New laws and surveillance programs sparked debates about how to balance safety and civil liberties. People disagreed about how far governments should go to stop terrorism while protecting individual rights. The fight against terrorism did not end quickly. Military missions, intelligence operations, and policy changes continued for years, affecting millions of people in the United States and around the world. Even as policies and conflicts evolved, 9/11 remained a reference point in discussions about national security, foreign policy, and how to respond to future threats. The consequences of 9/11 included not only the lives lost that day, but also those affected later by wars, displacement, and trauma. Understanding the full story means looking at both the immediate tragedy and its long-term effects. In the months after the attacks, Ground Zero became a massive recovery and cleanup site. Firefighters, construction workers, iron workers, engineers, and volunteers worked in difficult conditions to remove debris and search for remains. Many first responders and workers at Ground Zero later experienced serious health problems, including breathing issues and cancers linked to the dust and chemicals they were exposed to. Their struggles led to new programs and laws for medical care. The United States created special funds to compensate victims' families and assist those who were injured or sickened. These efforts could not replace what was lost, but they aimed to provide some measure of help and recognition. Architects, city leaders, and families debated how to rebuild at the World Trade Center site. They wanted to balance office space, public areas, and a powerful place of remembrance. The final design included 2 large square reflecting pools set in the footprints of the original towers. Water falls into their centers, and the names of all the victims are engraved around the edges. A museum at the site holds artifacts, recordings, and exhibits that tell the story of the attacks and the people affected by them. Visitors can see pieces of steel, damaged vehicles, and personal items that survived. One small tree, badly damaged in the attacks, was rescued and nursed back to health. Now called the Survivor Tree, it stands near the memorial as a living symbol of resilience and regrowth. On some anniversaries, 2 powerful beams of light shine into the night sky from near the memorial, creating the shape of the towers in light and reminding the city of what once stood there. Over time, new buildings rose, businesses returned, and everyday life resumed in Lower Manhattan. But for many people, the skyline and the streets would always carry memories of that day. Every year on September 11th, families, officials, and citizens gather at the memorials in New York, the Pentagon, and Pennsylvania to remember the victims. Bells toll, flags are lowered, and people stand in silence. At the New York Memorial, readers slowly recite the names of those who died. It takes hours to speak every name, reminding everyone that each person lost was an individual with a story and loved ones. Special attention is given to the firefighters, police officers, and EMS personnel who died while trying to save others. Their badges and helmet numbers are remembered, and their colleagues continue to serve in their honor. Ceremonies also honor office workers, airline crews, military personnel, and the passengers of Flight 93 who resisted hijackers. Together, they represent a cross-section of everyday life and extraordinary courage. Children born after 2001 learn about 9/11 from parents, teachers, and museums. For them, it is history rather than memory, but the stories ensure that the lessons and the people are not lost over time. 9/11 shows how quickly tragedy can strike, but also how people can respond with unity and compassion. Helping strangers, supporting first responders, and standing against hate are key lessons many take from that day. Our tiny storytellers bow their heads to honor everyone who died on 9/11 and everyone who tried to save them. By remembering firefighters, police officers, EMTs, office workers, airline crews, soldiers, passengers, and families, we say thank you and promise never to forget.